Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to talk about the incredible ripple effect of a single mistake. We're going to look at how one tiny wrong number in a hospital's plan created this massive domino effect that ended up impacting everything: the budget, the operating room schedule, and, even patient lives. It is a wild story and a really powerful lesson in how the smallest details can have absolutely huge consequences.
So, let me just start with this question. Just imagine for a second that you're running a hospital. What if one single number, just a tiny assumption buried deep inside some spreadsheet, could grind the entire system to a halt? Create a total operational traffic jam. Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack. And it all kicks off with this really powerful, but often kind of misunderstood idea.
And that idea is the learning curve theory. Now, it's actually a pretty simple concept at its core. The more you do something, the better and faster you get at it, right? You can think of it as the power of practice, but, converted into a mathematical formula. Hospitals use this all the time to predict how long new surgeries will take as their teams get more and more experience.
Okay, so here's where the story really gets started. The hospital, they planned for a brand new surgery and they used a pretty optimistic 85% learning rate. They basically assumed their surgeons would get super fast, super quickly. But in reality, they were learning at a 90% rate. Now, I know what you're thinking, 90% sounds better than 85, right? But with learning curve math, it's actually the opposite. A higher percentage means slower improvement, and that tiny 5% difference, well, that was the wrong number that started this whole mess.
So how on earth did this one number cause so much trouble? Well, the first hit was immediate, and it was right in the wallet, the financial fallout. Because let's be honest, especially in a hospital, time is money. A scheduling mistake very quickly becomes a major budget crisis.
And this table here, it just lays out the gap between the plan and reality perfectly. Because every single surgery was taking longer than they thought, the total labor hours just shot up. Of course, that meant costs were way higher, and the contribution margin, which is basically the profit from each surgery, was way lower than they'd forecasted. The hospital was now actually losing money on a procedure it was counting on to be profitable.
And just how big was that shortfall? A staggering 25% drop in their profit projections. Let that sink in. A single 5% error in their assumption led to this massive financial hit right from the get-go. This wasn't just a minor rounding error. This was a full-blown crisis.
So to sum up the damage here, the hospital was, for all intents and purposes, flying blind. Their cost forecasting was totally off. Their labor budget was completely blown. And worst of all, they were making these huge strategic investment decisions based on data that was just flat out wrong. But, the problem didn't just stay in the finance department. Oh no. The ripple effect started spreading out through the entire hospital, and it created this huge, system-wide operational traffic jam.
This slide shows that domino effect in action. It all starts with that one incorrect surgery time forecast. That causes the operating rooms to run late. And then, all of a sudden, the recovery room, the PACU, has no space for new patients because the old ones are still in surgery. And the result? Complete gridlock, system-wide delays, and even cancellations for totally different patients.
And here's what that did to their capacity. So, the hospital thought it had a certain number of surgery slots available. That's the planned capacity bar. But because every surgery took longer, their actual throughput was so much lower. And that gap between the two bars, that's just wasted potential. It's surgeries that never happened. It's patients that couldn't get treated. And you could feel this strain everywhere. Staffing was a total nightmare, with surgeons and nurses just constantly pulling overtime. The schedule was completely unreliable. Even the supply chain got hit. They ended up mismanaging expensive implants and tying up a bunch of money in inventory they couldn't even use. Literally every part of the hospital's day-to-day was under pressure. And that brings us to the most important consequence of all of this, the human cost. Because behind all these numbers and charts and operational problems are real people waiting for care. At the end of the day, here's what it comes down to. When you get your capacity wrong, it directly hurts patients' ability to get timely care. The gridlock we saw meant the hospital simply couldn't do as many surgeries as it had promised. And the patients who desperately needed that care, well, they were the ones forced to wait and wait and wait.
So let's just break down what this means. It all boils down to the fact that one wrong number absolutely tanked the patient's experience. Fewer surgery slots available meant longer waiting lists, and ultimately the system's failure became the patient's burden, straight up reducing their access to critical, timely medical treatment.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? Let's zoom out from this one hospital for a second and look at the bigger picture.
because this story teaches a lesson that really applies to any leader in any field.
This, right here, is the core idea. An operational assumption, something that seems as simple as a learning curve percentage, isn't just a number you plug into a formula. It's a strategic instrument. It literally shapes your budget, your capacity, your staffing, and your entire ability to deliver on your mission.
This chart really visualizes the whole story, doesn't it? One single assumption, that learning rate, rippled out and touched every single part of the organization. Finance, staffing, capacity, the supply chain, and most critically, patient care. It just goes to show how deeply interconnected everything really is.
And this is what it really boils down to. This is what separates simple management from true leadership. A manager, they see the formula, but a leader sees the consequences. That ability to connect a tiny operational detail to its massive organization-wide impact, that is the very definition of strategic thinking.
So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. What's the simple math in your world? In your organization or in your work? What are those basic assumptions that you rely on every single day that might, just might, have hidden strategic consequences you haven't even thought about yet? Thanks so much for joining me.